When I finally drove back to my family ranch after nearly 10 long years away, I expected a quiet moment filled with nostalgia. One of those slow, breath-catching pauses where you look across the land and suddenly every childhood memory comes rushing back. From the mornings when my father taught me how to saddle a horse to the evenings when my grandfather and I used to sit on the porch listening to crickets echo across the open fields. But the moment my truck rolled to a stop in the old dirt driveway, that peaceful return I'd spent years imagining was instantly shattered by a shrill, commanding voice that cracked through the silence like a whip. And when I turned, I saw a woman marching toward me with the kind of confidence only someone dangerously unaware of their own limits could have. This was the woman the entire area whispered about, the one known as HOA Karen, clutching her oversized clipboard as if it were a royal decree and glaring at me as though she had been personally appointed to guard the gates of my own home. Without even asking who I was, she jabbed her finger at my truck and declared that I was violating multiple HOA regulations. Then announced, with the arrogance of a self-appointed dictator, that my ranch, my father's ranch, my grandfather's ranch, was now subject to her HOA's authority, as if decades of legal ownership and blood-soaked family history meant absolutely nothing to her self-created power. When I tried to explain, she cut me off instantly, raising her voice and claiming that the HOA controlled all land within a certain radius, and that I was trespassing on HOA-regulated property. Which was so absurd I almost laughed. But before I could even get a word out, she stormed a few steps away, whipped out her phone, and with dramatic flair announced she was calling the police to have me removed immediately, shouting loud enough for half the neighborhood to hear. Within minutes, a patrol car pulled into the dusty driveway, and 2 officers stepped out looking both curious and exhausted, as if this wasn't their first encounter with her. And when they approached me, I calmly presented my ID and the original, notarized deed to the land, a document older than Karen herself, while she hovered behind them, ranting nonstop about community rules, violation procedures, and mandatory HOA compliance policies, none of which actually existed. The officers studied the deed carefully, exchanged a glance that said everything, then politely asked Karen for proof that her HOA had any legal authority over my property, which only made her louder and more frantic as she waved her clipboard like it was some kind of sacred scripture, insisting that she ran the entire neighborhood. But then came the turning point, the moment everything crumbled for her, when one of the officers pulled up the county database on his tablet, typed in the HOA's supposed registration, and after a few seconds of scrolling, looked up and said in the calmest voice possible that the HOA was not registered at all. Not with the county, not with the state, not with any governing body whatsoever, meaning her entire HOA was completely invalid, and every rule, every fine, every threat she had issued over the years was legally meaningless. As if on cue, a county compliance officer arrived, summoned by the police because this situation was more serious than a typical neighbor dispute. And after reviewing her documents, he informed her that operating an unregistered HOA, issuing fines, and threatening legal action without authority could lead to substantial penalties. The look on Karen's face shifted from confidence to panic in seconds, her clipboard trembling as neighbors, drawn out by the commotion, gathered nearby, whispering to each other with visible relief, because for years she had terrorized them with fabricated rules, pointless fines for leaving garden tools outside, threatening letters about mailbox height, warnings about the color of flower pots, and endless harassment disguised as community enforcement. Yet now her entire empire was collapsing in front of the very people she'd intimidated into silence. The compliance officer handed her a formal dissolution notice, stating clearly that her HOA was not just illegitimate but must cease all operations immediately, and Karen, who moments earlier acted like a ruler, now stood frozen, pale, and speechless as the reality settled in that she held exactly zero authority. Meanwhile, the neighbors slowly approached me, not with hesitation but with gratitude, some thanking me for unintentionally exposing the truth, others shaking my hand, and a few even laughing quietly at the poetic justice of it all. And as the sun began sinking behind the rolling hills, casting long golden shadows across the fields I grew up on, I felt a deep mix of relief and triumph wash over me, realizing that in less than 5 minutes, the woman who tried to kick me off my own ranch had lost the entire false kingdom she had built. Her fake HOA legally dissolved right on the soil she tried to claim. leaving me not only with my land restored but with a community finally freed from the suffocating grip of a self-imposed tyrant. All because I simply came home.